Ever get that feeling like you're just swamped with news, headlines flying everywhere, but still kind of feel like you're missing the real story, the big shifts that are actually shaping things?
Absolutely. It's so easy to get lost in the noise.
Well, that's exactly the kind of deep water we're diving into today. We're going to be navigating all the buzz coming out of that Bitcoin 2024 conference.
Lots to unpack there.
Tons. But we're going to be zeroing in on Michael Saylor. Some of his insights specifically really got us thinking.
Yeah, his perspective is always thought-provoking.
For sure. So we've been poring over the transcripts, the keynotes, really trying to distill it all down. And our mission here, honestly, cut through the noise, give you the crucial bits, the stuff that could actually have an impact.
Exactly. We want to make sure you walk away understanding what really matters.
Right, because let's be real, there's always hype, right? But we want to get to the substance. And as we dug into it, a few key themes really jumped out. Like, there's this growing sense that politically things are shifting around Bitcoin.
Definitely seeing that.
And then there's the whole regulatory landscape, some potentially massive changes on the horizon.
Yeah, that could be a game changer.
No kidding. And of course, we can't talk Bitcoin without talking about the price swings, the volatility.
Always a hot topic.
Always. But maybe there's a different way to look at it. And then zooming out even further, what is Bitcoin really becoming at its core? This whole digital store of value concept.
It's a fascinating evolution.
All right, well, let's jump right in. One of the things that really grabbed everyone's attention at the conference was former President Trump's involvement.
No doubt. That was a big moment. Especially that idea he put forward about creating a national Bitcoin stockpile.
A national stockpile, wow.
Yeah, and a lot of people saw that as a pretty significant step, like a real sign that politically, Bitcoin is starting to be recognized as a strategic asset.
And it wasn't just him up there giving a speech.
Right.
Our sources say Michael Saylor was actually involved too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He was in the thick of it.
And not just him, but some big names from the Bitcoin mining world as well. Companies like Marathon Digital, Riot Platforms, Core Scientific.
All heavy hitters in the mining space.
They were all actively engaged in discussions with Trump's team, which that's interesting in itself.
It is.
Right.
If you connect the dots, it looks like the main focus of these discussions was all about boosting Bitcoin mining right here in the U.S.
Domestic mining, okay.
Yeah, and the reasoning behind that seems pretty clear. Create more jobs here at home.
Makes sense.
And also, super important, strengthen our energy security. And both of those, of course, tie right back into that idea of establishing a national Bitcoin reserve.
So it's not just a political figure talking about Bitcoin, it's like actively engaging with the industry and potentially integrating it into the nation's strategic holdings. That feels, I don't know, like bigger than just a headline.
I agree. It definitely suggests a possible fundamental shift in how mainstream politics views cryptocurrency.
Like cryptocurrency is becoming, well, less fringe, more accepted.
Yeah, exactly. It's moving into the mainstream conversation. And this potential shift in the political landscape, it leads right into another crucial area we wanted to discuss. Regulations.
Regulations, always a fun topic.
Right. But Michael Saylor, he laid out some really interesting thoughts at the conference. Specifically, 3 regulatory changes that he believes could unlock massive growth for Bitcoin.
Massive. Like how massive are we talking?
He threw out a number. You ready?
Hit me with it.
100-fold increase in adoption.
Whoa, 100-fold. That's a huge jump.
It is. So let's break down these potential game changers. The first one, it's all about establishing clearer legal frameworks for Bitcoin.
Okay, legal framework. So what does that even mean?
Basically, right now, there's a lot of uncertainty. Is Bitcoin legally considered property? Is it a currency? Or is it something else entirely? A brand new asset class?
So it's kind of in this gray area.
Exactly. And that gray area, it makes big institutional investors hesitant. They're not sure how to approach it, how to categorize it within their existing systems.
I can see how that would be a hurdle.
Oh, absolutely. And Saylor himself, he's been really vocal about this. He keeps emphasizing the need for what he calls clear, bright line definitions when it comes to digital assets.
Clear, bright lines. So basically, everyone needs to be on the same page about what Bitcoin actually is, legally speaking.
Exactly. That's the first piece of the puzzle. The second key element Saylor highlighted is tax incentives.
Tax incentives. Okay, like what kind of incentives?
The idea is to give companies tax breaks or advantages for holding Bitcoin, similar to how other types of investments get preferential tax treatment.
Ah, okay. So it's about making it financially more appealing for companies to, say, add Bitcoin to their balance sheets.
Precisely. Make it a more attractive option from a financial standpoint.
Got it. So, clearer legal definitions, tax breaks to encourage holding. What's the third big regulatory shift?
This one's a bit more, well, comprehensive. Saylor referred to the potential for something called the Bitcoin Act of 2024.
The Bitcoin Act, okay? Never heard of that. What's that all about?
So the goal of this act would be to create clear regulatory standards for digital assets across the board. Things like anti-money laundering protocols, measures to make sure the market is operating with integrity, the whole nine
To
yards.
make it all above board, basically.
Exactly. And the thinking is that would make traditional financial institutions way more comfortable with Bitcoin.
Because right now, it just seems too Wild West for them.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. This act would be about bringing Bitcoin into the fold, making it more familiar, more regulated, more appealing for those big players.
So basically, clearer rules of the road.
Exactly.
So we've got clearer legal definitions, tax benefits to encourage holding, and then this potential Bitcoin Act to bring it all under one regulatory umbrella. Sounds like that could be a pretty powerful combination.
I think so too.
But of course, whenever we talk about Bitcoin, we can't avoid the elephant in the room, the volatility.
Right, the price swings. Always a good conversation.
Always. But Saylor had an interesting take on it, didn't he?
Oh, he did. He basically reframed that volatility. Instead of seeing it as a bad thing, he called it vitality.
Vitality, huh? That's a pretty positive spin.
It is. His argument was that those big price drops, yeah, they might freak out short-term traders. But for long-term investors, they actually present opportunities.
Opportunities, okay.
Yeah, because historically, after those drops, the price has tended to bounce back, often pretty quickly. And if you're holding, you're in a position to benefit from that.
So the idea is if you have a long-term view, you can ride out those dips and come out ahead.
That's the thinking. And he pointed to MicroStrategy as a prime example. Their whole investment strategy is built on that very idea.
Right. Buy the dip, hold for the long haul. And they've put their money where their mouth is, haven't they?
Oh, big time. As of June 2024, their Bitcoin holdings were a staggering 226,331 Bitcoins.
226,000 Bitcoins. That's what, like billions of dollars?
Yeah, around 15.4 billion, give or take. So clearly, they're pretty committed to this long-term strategy. Now, we did see some slight variations in their reported holdings in the reports around that time, but this June figure is the one tied to the conference we're discussing.
Still, that's an insane amount of Bitcoin. It really shows how strongly some of these big players believe in its long-term potential.
Absolutely. It's a conviction that a lot of investors share.
So to sum up their approach, they basically weather the storms, the ups and downs, and when prices drop, they see it as a buying opportunity because they believe that overall the long-term trend is going to be upward.
Exactly. And that long-term perspective, it ties into how Saylor sees Bitcoin fundamentally. He called it a bank in cyberspace.
Bank in cyberspace. Okay, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is, but it gets to the heart of what he believes Bitcoin can be. He's talking about a financial system that's truly global, accessible to anyone with an internet connection, a system that's potentially more affordable, more efficient, and ultimately more secure.
Secure? How so?
Because it's run by code, by software, not by humans. No central authority that can be corrupted or manipulated.
So it's like a decentralized, trustless system.
Exactly. He's especially focused on the potential it has for people who don't have access to traditional banking. The billions of people around the world who are essentially excluded from the current system.
So it's not just a digital asset, it's like a whole new foundation for the financial system.
That's the vision.
Right.
And while we're talking about this foundational aspect, it's also worth noting that ownership of Bitcoin isn't exactly evenly distributed.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember reading about that. It's like a very small percentage of people hold a very large percentage of the Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, research from the National Bureau of Economic Research back in 2021 showed that at the end of 2020, around 1/3 of all Bitcoin was held by just the top 10,000 investors.
Wow, 1/3. That's a pretty small group controlling a lot of the supply. So how does that play into this whole picture we're talking about?
Well, it definitely contributes to the price volatility we discussed earlier, but it also suggests a very strong belief in Bitcoin's future among those big players.
Because they're holding on to it.
Exactly. They're not selling, they're holding, which implies a long-term view.
So you've got these big players with a lot of skin in the game, weathering the volatility, potentially even contributing to stability as they hold. Okay, let's try to connect all these dots. We've got Trump's proposal, the potential regulatory changes, and this concentration of ownership. How does it all fit together?
Well, if we look at how these things might interact, Trump's proposal for a national stockpile, that could be a huge catalyst. It could really push those regulatory changes forward, especially that Bitcoin Act.
Okay, so the political interest aligning with the needs of these big institutions.
Exactly. And that could create an environment where wider institutional adoption becomes much more likely.
And then these big players who already hold a lot of Bitcoin, their commitment to holding, that could provide some underlying stability as more traditional players start to enter the space.
Right. It's like a reinforcing cycle.
And what about those tax incentives Saylor mentioned? Where do they fit in?
Those could be the fuel that really gets things moving. If it becomes more financially attractive for corporations to hold Bitcoin, you could see a big surge in demand. And that increased demand, well, it could lead to more price stability over time.
As Bitcoin becomes more mainstream, basically.
Yeah, as it becomes more widely held and accepted.
Okay, so to bring it all home for you listening out there, we're seeing a potential shift happening in the political landscape. Bitcoin is gaining traction as a strategic asset. And there are serious discussions happening about regulatory changes that could really open the floodgates for wider adoption. Bitcoin's price might be a roller coaster right now, but a lot of people believe that volatility actually benefits those who are in it for the long haul. And fundamentally, this idea of Bitcoin as a decentralized, secure store of value, a bank in cyberspace, that idea is gaining momentum.
It's a fascinating evolution to watch.
It really is. And understanding these developments, how they all connect, it gives you a really valuable perspective on how the financial landscape is changing.
Absolutely. And it raises some big questions for all of us, for you listening. With these potential changes, with this growing interest from politicians and big institutions, what does it mean for the future of our traditional financial systems? What does it mean for individual investors? It's a dynamic situation, and staying informed is key.
Couldn't agree more. Well, this has been a deep dive into just one aspect of the Bitcoin conversation, and it's a conversation that's constantly evolving. We encourage you to keep exploring these topics, keep thinking critically about what it all means. Thanks for joining us.